Yes, Mhlekazi, thanks again for talking to us. Let's talk about the Sikhakhane report.
Yeah.
Specifically, who initiated the report? Because there is some belief that you were doing Moyane's bidding against some other person. How did this brief come about?
Well, let me start by saying you'll appreciate as a lawyer that because I was briefed, there are issues of merit that I wouldn't like to talk about. But I'll try and be as honest as I can to you about those aspects about which I can talk to you. A lot has been said about that report, but I was appointed by the then acting commissioner, Ivan Pillay. I had no idea about who Moyane was. I had never met him. I didn't know him. So the answer is it was established by the acting commissioner, Ivan Pillay, whom I knew.
Yes. How did you know him?
I knew of him as an activist. I knew him, but I had just done another investigation with Judge Zeki Yakub. And so he knew me as well, that I had just been part of that investigation. So I guess that's why he called me. In fact, I got a call from his attorney when I was in the SCA that it had been announced that I was doing this. In fact, I knew that before I got the call and people were phoning. But so anyway, the answer is Ivan Pillay, who was acting commissioner, appointed me.
Yes. Now, you had a panel. You sat with two other colleagues.
Yes.
And while you were doing this investigation, then Mr. Moyane was appointed as the commissioner, as I understand it. And you went over to see him.
Well, Mr. Moyane is appointed when we really about to finish. And so we go to meet him as a courtesy because, it caught all of us by surprise. We are busy trying to write the report and compile the record of what we have. And we had been appointed for 45 days. Because at the time we were appointed to look at a specific issue that had arisen that the commissioner wanted to do, the acting commissioner wanted us to look at. And so, of course, when you have an investigation like this, particularly when it's open, when other people can come and you can look into other things, because we could look into any other thing that arose. And so, of course, while we were writing it, while we were doing the investigation, a lot of people we called and others who wanted to come, because I think for many of them it was a rare opportunity to talk about things that grievances they had had, and some were relevant, others were irrelevant HR issues, but then other issues just stood out. That even though we had a particular issue that we were to investigate, the other issues that emerged were issues that we had to bring to the attention of the person who appointed us.
Okay. So just to get this out of the way, when you went to visit Mr. Moyane as a courtesy, as you say, did he add anything to your terms of reference? Did he subtract anything? Did he change anything?
Nothing. That whole idea that Moyane told us what to change is a narrative created by people for reasons I don't know. We had a very short meeting with him. He introduced himself, and I think I said to him, well, Chief, it's up to you. We are about to finish what we're doing. Do we continue? Because we all didn't know him. He said, no, I just wanted to introduce myself and say, I'm the new commissioner. Tell me when you're done. Do you need more time? We said, no, we don't need more time. We've got what we think is something for SARS to look at. Because we were doing this not for one individual, but for the organization to get some benefit from our investigation. And by the way, let me add this. You will read my report, even in the past 6 years of condemnation and media narratives. There is no individual in that report we sort of judge or make an adverse finding about, or attribute something as big as the unit that is the subject of debate in South Africa for the past 6 years.
The high-risk investigating unit.
There is no individual, including my loudest critics of those who are affected by this, I don't attribute this unit and its what I thought was its unlawful establishment to any individual. In fact, I realized the limited time we had, and we realized that this matter requires a platform where people, before you attribute wrongdoing to individuals, can come and testify and be cross-examined and defend themselves. If my report had been read without what we spoke about, political fallout or narratives and biases that people have, you would find that it's uncontroversial. But unfortunately, none of us could ever anticipate the fallout that happened thereafter. As you know, as lawyers, we don't implement what we suggest, and sometimes the client can take your investigation report and put it in a shelf and do nothing. I am not in control of how it's implemented.
Yeah, just to be clear, because people on social media and your critics are criticizing you for saying there was a rogue report, a rogue unit which was unlawful. As I read the report, it had it had about 10 or 9 terms of reference. Was there anywhere in those terms of reference where it asks you to determine whether or not there is a rogue unit which is unlawful?
Not at all. What it did was that we must look at the aspect which was a relationship between an employee and somebody else. And then it says if any other subject that comes up,
yes,
or it could be unlawful or any other subject that comes up. And of course at the time, you producing a report, not a judgment of anybody, a report to give to your clients to say, this is what we've done on this subject, and this is what we've found. But our limited time is such that you must establish a commission of inquiry to look into this aspect, and for the original issue that related to an employee, we don't even judge that employee, right? We say, create a disciplinary hearing for this employee. He has a case to answer, but he must answer that case where he can defend himself, where there is justice. We don't judge that employee even. We say a different process must do that. And so if one looked, if that report had not come out in the middle of a fallout between different individuals, it would have been uncontroversial. And if it had not been implemented by people getting fired, that report would not have been talked about a month thereafter.
Yes. Now, you recommended the establishment of a commission of inquiry. Then a couple of months later, I think, the Nugent Commission was established. Is it much later? Does it strike you that the Nugent Commission was intended as the commission that you had in mind in your recommendation?
No.
You alluded to certain...
It's not that even if I believe it wasn't.
It wasn't.
No.
You alluded to certain issues in your report that should be investigated further, because in the limited 45 days that you had, you wouldn't have had the time to, and you also didn't have the time to subpoena and subpoena documents and summon people to come and testify, that only a commission of inquiry would have those powers. Yes. I don't know if you've read the 2 reports of the Nugent Commission. There was an interim report and then a final report. In what has come out of those reports, if you've read them, do you believe that they've investigated any of the issues that you identified in your report?
No, I don't think they did. It did, and I don't think it was established to find that truth that I intended the Commission of Inquiry suggested to find.
Okay, so the Commission of Inquiry that you recommended has yet to be established?
It has never been established.
Yes. Now,
partly because that Nugent Commission, and I'm saying this because I wrote to him. I wrote to him when he made the inquiries to me. I think it came at a time when the fallout I could not anticipate was happening. And I did, I think it featured at the time when that fallout was happening, and I don't think it was the independent commission to look at wrongdoing of everybody as I anticipated. I think when it was established, I think a certain group of people were already tagged. And I wanted a commission of inquiry that tags no one, but digs deep without any narrative it seeks to confirm. And that is why I didn't make adverse findings against individuals, because I believe a commission of inquiry must start from a clean slate, so that everyone, even if we like them, if they've done something wrong, they can account.
Okay. Just 3 more questions on this. In, I think, paragraph 52 of your report, you say that SARS forms an integral part of South Africa's economic and political life.
Yes.
Now, I can understand the economic part of it. They have to collect taxes. That's where government gets its revenues in part for funding service delivery and so on. But what about SARS is an integral political thing?
Because if it collapsed, the line you're drawing, that it's purely economic, is fallacious. If SARS collapsed, it's actually our political institutions and structures that would collapse. The political life of South Africa would be in jeopardy. And that is why it attracts so much attention from economic investors, foreign investors, politicians themselves. It's because while its job is to, at least in my view, is to deal with revenue, but it's such an important institution for the survival of the entire political structure of South Africa. And so I mean politics in that way, of our political system, not the politics that ensued thereafter.
Not the party politics.
No, it's the politics, not the narratives that were pursued by people and their journalists thereafter. It was all a fight, and I always believe that people who assemble journalists to parrot their narratives have something to hide. If you don't have anything to hide, you don't need editors on your side. The reason I've never spoken to journalists in the past 6 years about this, I didn't create a book or narrative. I had nothing to hide. The people who have something to hide usually are those who assemble journalists, sit with them in Melrose Arc and Kempton Park and wherever, so that they can channel a particular narrative. When you've got nothing to hide, you need no editor, you need no journalist on your side, you need the truth on your side.
Okay, a penultimate question in the time remaining. You then identify the high-risk investigating unit of SARS, the so-called rogue unit. I think the words you use to describe it, you say it's the ugly spot at SARS. What's ugly about it?
My view at the time, and by the way, Ngalona, in that long report of mine, the only thing that's been talked about is that line. And I was not doing an opinion. It's a line that actually should not have been controversial. I still believe that my view was that when I can't find an enabling provision in the statute that creates a particular organ of state, when I can't find a provision that empowers it to do a particular action, that's what I was taught is legality. Not whether or not it's prevented, whether or not there's an empowering legislation for what it does. And so that comment related to the fact that a lot of people that come before us, there were memoranda and people who indicated how it was formed and what it was doing. Of course, the biggest mistake I would make, and I didn't make it, was to make conclusions about it and make findings about people. So that comment is because of the things that came up, was the thing I thought has the potential to compromise this good, important institution. And it was intended to be given to whoever was commissioner. And at the time when we were writing it, and I didn't care who was commissioner, I would have given it to Ivan Pillay to say, these are the things we found. We don't make findings about people because I think these things are bigger than what we've found. But we must create a forum before we judge people where they can defend themselves. Of course, the rest is history. I presented it to SARS. They've never come back to me to tell me it's a report they don't like. Not one. 6 years later, I know people have talked about it, but the institution that was my client never told me that they didn't like what I did. They implemented it in whatever way they did. I may or may not approve of what they did, but that's none of my business. My business was to say, this is what I saw. I can't attribute it to individuals because it would be unjust. Create a forum where you can investigate it, and before you judge individuals, give them proper platforms to defend themselves. But I can't implicate them.
Yes.
And that is why at the end of that report, forget people who are frothing in the mouth in the past 6 years about me. There is no individual that I made an adverse comment about or attributed what I saw as unlawful to them. I never did.
Yes. Finally, Mhlekazi, there has been, I hesitate to call it a narrative because people may view me as being on one side of the debate or the other.
Sure.
But for lack of a better term, let's call it a narrative.
Sure.
Especially in the media, certainly that I've seen, that points to the fact that KPMG had withdrawn its report about the so-called rogue unit, that Justice Kron, who chaired some, I don't know what to call it, is it a committee or something, or an inquiry, who said, no, I relied on what the Sikhakhane report said, and there was nothing wrong with the rogue unit, and in fact it must be brought back, with Justice Nugent saying he couldn't find anything in your report that suggests that the high-risk investigation unit, aka rogue unit, was unlawful in any way. And people bring up, the media brings up all these examples with a view, it seems to me, to casting aspersions on your supposed findings in your report. In the light of all of that, I don't know if this is a fair question, but let me put it anyway. In the light of all of this, what's your thinking?
Nothing has changed my view that the organization called SARS had something to investigate in order to fix itself, right? And that was my view. The entire, what you're talking about, I don't want to talk about Nugent, Kron, or KPMG, really, they must answer for themselves. And they know in their hearts of hearts whether they were following a particular political narrative or being lawyers. My sense was that do what you asked to investigate. It may not be perfect. The worst thing you can do is to have no time, produce something, and make findings about people. And so what I did was produce this report, to present it to SARS, to say, do what you like with it, but these are the things I found. But if you want to attribute it to individuals, to find them guilty and all of this, do a proper forum. I was interested in fixing them, not in political rivalry and narratives and who must be fired and who hates who. And I was not doing it in order to support a particular narrative of, I didn't know any narrative. I was just trying to assist SARS to fix what I thought was a problem to be fixed, as I had been told by many people who came. And so, many people who say they were affected by this, it's not me. I didn't fire anybody. I didn't suggest anyone to be fired. And lastly, I didn't make an adverse finding, even about people who say they didn't get a chance to speak. Some of them are lying about it, by the way. I spoke to them twice, and they still go around saying I didn't give them a chance. The reason I didn't ask some people about the rogue unit, is because I was not going to attribute its establishment to anybody, to them. So there is no adverse finding, at least in my report. First, I don't call it the rogue unit, nowhere in my report. So it's all, I understand what it was, Ngalwana. I suffered for it, and people continue. I mean, 3 or so books written, people write all sorts of things, but it's all what we were talking about earlier. It's lack of honesty in society about what is happening in politics, and its political preferences and narratives that are peddled at the expense of truth finding.
Yeah, sorry, I know I said finally, but I wanted to ask you finally,
Yeah.
what effect, if any, this all has had on you as a person?
Gee, big effect, because I faced threats during that period. I sold my house. I thought of quitting the profession because this hatred, I'm not suggesting it's anybody who was at SARS, but these political narratives also are adopted by other crowds who I call hangers-on in politics. And so I faced narratives constantly in the media. They continue today. I don't care about them, but it was difficult to deal with being a victim of political rivalry and narratives that had nothing to do with me. And that affected me largely because I just felt that people who know the truth, and by the way, Ngalwana, I think it will still come out the day we South Africans get out of this mode we are in, where we are not interested in fixing the country. We are interested in punishing people we don't like and rewarding those we like. The day we really are interested in dealing with going to the belly of the beast about this society and what's wrong with it, we will know that these two groups we call good and evil don't exist. It's an evil system with people fighting for survival. And even the ones who tell us that they are innocent and they are good, they are fighting corruption, they are not. And the ones who are accused may not be the only ones who are doing wrong. We need one day to deal with this problem without weaponizing it, without politicizing it. And I still believe that the truth about what I suggested must be investigated has not come out yet.
On that prophetic note, thank you, Mr. Sikhakhane. Thank you, Clemens. Thanks for talking to us.